We are back. You are chatting with John P. Today we are going to be talking about Rolex watches. Yes, Rolex watches. Now on YouTube and on the internet and in the watch community, everyone wants to talk about Rolex. There's nothing new about that. But what I'm going to be doing is sharing some insights, some pricing data, and a little bit of a shortened analysis of what I see going on with Rolex watches currently. I think there's some things that we can learn from this as watch collectors. And even though I may have some bit of a bias because I do own Delray Watch here with Federico, Federico Talks Watches, DelrayWatch.com, where we sell certainly plenty of Rolex watches. What I'm going to be sharing with you is almost contrary to what some would think I should be saying. So hopefully that's enough to negate any of the biases there. You know, we do sell Rolex. They do sell pretty quickly, but if you watch this channel, you know, while I have Rolex in my personal collection, I also have a lot of other cool things like this vintage Enocar Sherpa guide. Love this, and so many other watches. So I can definitely say that I'm not a Rolex fanboy, but I'm also not a Rolex hater. Also, guys, please do not forget the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. It goes a whole long way. So what's going on with Rolex? The prices are getting absolutely crazy, and we're getting into uncharted territories. Now, I'll share with you some pricing data, but I want to get into a couple of models here because if you haven't been in the market or in the secondhand market for some of these watch models, not even the most desirable, but some of the lesser desirable, you might be a little bit shocked with the pricing and also just how many are available in the market. So right away, the 116610LN, that is your standard ceramic bezel Submariner. That's going to be the last version, not the current iteration, but the one prior. That is roughly $12,500 depending on where you buy this. Now, there's going to be, I'll kind of preface some of these pricings by saying that these numbers I'm sharing here are not the absolute lowest price private party. These are the numbers that the watches are selling at from the largest dealers. There's a couple of dealers. We all know who they are. They have the most market share, and this is the pricing that they are selling and advertising these watches at, which would be kind of the pricing model that others, including us, base our pricing off of. We always try to be a little more competitive, but not everyone. Some is in par or in line with this pricing. So 12 and a half, but there's 1,000 of these on Chrono24. Go to Chrono24, type the model or the reference number in. There's over 1,600, but then you subtract the 600, which come down to the Hulk, the LV, the 116610 LV. These are at 20,000. Once again, you could hunt around private party or find a wheeler and dealer or a flipper and get a little bit less, but kind of the secondhand good condition, great condition retail is $20,000, and there's 560 of these available on Chrono24, and roughly 100 more on the forums. Between all the forums and the eBay, some overlap, but you get the picture. Tons of these available for anyone to buy in the market at that price point and a little bit below. Then we get into the Daytona, and we'll talk about the black Daytona, the ceramic bezel, current generation black Daytona. But keep in mind, the white's even a little bit more desirable, but the 116500LN is at $30,000 from the biggest players in the industry that set the market price or the aspirational price on these watches, and there's 370. So I'll say out of all the watches I'm talking about here, the Daytona has the fewest available on Chrono24, but something to keep in mind is the Daytona has always produced less watches than the other models. It's a chronograph, so it had a different utility value. Now it's more of a luxury value in it, but the Daytona has always been a model that has taken a little bit more difficult of a time to get compared to something like your staple Rolex Submariner. But once again, there's hundreds of these available on Chrono24 and the like. Moving on to a watch that is increasingly desirable now, but just a short year and a half ago, this was a watch that took a bit of selling. We had one in stock for a few weeks, and for Rolex, that's difficult. This is going to be the 16570. Now, this is a watch that is not even current generation, right? This is your Explorer 2 non-current generation watch, $8,000 but there's 569 of these available on Chrono24, and the forums there's even more, and on eBay even more. So this is a non-current generation Rolex model selling for thousands of dollars above what they were going for just a year ago. And, you know, a good portion of this has happened in the last 12 months or so. And lastly, let's talk about the 16013 two-tone Rolex Datejust, a watch that's decades old that would literally sit on our shelves on DelReyWatch.com. Now they're going quickly, and they're $5,000 to $6,000, but there's hundreds of them available on Chrono24 throughout the world. So interesting data. And I already know there's going to be people in the comments that say, oh, I found one cheaper, I found one more expensive, this and that. Guys, yes, I'm speaking in generalities here. The world is a big place. There's so many platforms. The pricing goes all over, but these are the industry leaders making these prices, and I'm giving you the amount available on Chrono24 at the shooting of this video. Not a year from now when people watch this video maybe and leave a comment that the data is wrong. This is as of today. But what does this mean? First of all, what am I noticing? We know that the supply is not that low. You can look at these numbers, and in the case of the Submariner, there's over 1,000 of these available for anyone to buy in the market right now. Sure, over manufacturer retail price, but they're there and people can get them. So when you think of supply and demand, sure, I think the demand has gone up, and I'll touch on that in a second, but the supply has also not really gone down. These are numbers I've been checking over time, and it's not like they're used to be 3,000 Submariners and now there's 1,000. There might have been 1,200 or 1,100, and this is part of what we do every day as watch dealers. We look at pricing and we try to forecast in our mind, you know, should we stock it at this price, should we not? And we talk with a lot of other dealers that do the same thing. This is what we do as business people in the watch industry, and the demand has gone up, but the quantity that's available has really not gone down. It's kind of stayed at that point, 1,000, 1,200 range, and it fluctuates. So that's the first thing we notice, is that hasn't changed. So that kind of gets you thinking, okay, well, what is going on here? Why do people actually want to add these into their collection? And so what we see is you have a couple of players in the industry, you know, Del Rey not one of them, but you have a couple of players, and increasingly so when you start factoring in the real and similar consignment type shops. But you have some couple of players that are venture capital backed companies that take on a huge staff. And I mean, you know, look at the acquisition, right, of Watchfinder and some of the others that are kind of developing in the industry, and you see that these very large companies are treating these watches as almost assets, right? You have a lot of people talking about watches as investments, and I think what we see here is that kind of mentality has trickled over into people that are not watch enthusiasts, watch collectors, right? We're watch enthusiasts, we're watch collectors, we go on YouTube, we go on the forums, we talk about these things, but when you have, you know, your aunt and your uncle who are an accountant somewhere, never even bought a luxury item or never even, you know, had a watch collection, all of a sudden asking, hey, do you think this Rolex Submariner Daytona is a good alternative investment? I think that's telling of the times. And this is something I'm hearing a lot more. People on the street, almost like what happened with GameStop stock, right? You have your grandmother asking you, should I buy GME? And when that happens, it's something to stand back and really think about, how is this happening? Are watches no longer enthusiasts? Are these asset classes? But when you go circle back and factor in that there are plenty of these things available, where is the pricing coming from? And the pricing leads to the venture capital backed companies that are pushing the prices up because they need to, because of all the expenses that come with the marketing, the budgets, the hundreds of employees. And so do I think that the pricing is going to stay stable or go up? I think a lot rests on the shoulder of the people that are holding or sell the most in terms of volume of these watches, right? Think of a company like a Real or similar, and, you know, perhaps the business play doesn't work out and the pricing capabilities of that entity start losing in the marketplace, and that could trickle out, and in which case, now I'm only giving warning, I'm not saying this is going to happen, by the way, and in which case the watches the Rolex watches are not like equities, right? If you buy a stock, you could always put it on the market for a sell price and someone could buy it, or the market price and sell it at the market price. But let's say you have a couple Submariners as alternative investments or something like that, or as an asset class, and then all of a sudden the market starts tanking, people want to get out of these watches. Well, you have to go to a dealer or sell it private party. A private party is not going to be buying on the way down for the hopes that it goes back up, right? Buying down and kind of cost factoring it in that way. No, these are watches at the end of the day. So the dealers will start to be approached, and the dealers are going to be trying to get rid of the watches because they've been stocking up on them. And you see just how many watches are available on Chrono24. So I think it's tough, as an alternative investment. If you have the liquid cash just to play around and you like the watch, kind of like they say, I like the stock. If you like the watch, great. That sounds awesome. And if you're a watch enthusiast, certainly makes sense. Rolex makes some quality watches. But in terms of, them being assets protected by a scarcity, the scarcity is really at the authorized dealer level. We see just how many of these are in stock, and I think getting rid of them is going to be difficult. For example, if they're all of a sudden tends to be a rush and people need to get out of the Rolex. They see the prices going down. They bought them as investments, or, perhaps they couldn't afford them. I'll tell you right away, as a watch dealer, if the prices are going down, we're not going to be buying Rolex. And the same sentiments are shared between all the people that we know out there. We're not going to be buying the watches as they go down because, as watch dealers, we're not investors. We're not investing in watches. We're selling watches. We're dealing. We're consulting in them. We're working with them. We're creating content around them. But we're not going to be buying on the way down for the hopes that they go up. We'd be buying the watches that are fairly stable at the market price. Now, I know this is a bit controversial for some that are diehard Rolex collectors, but this is something that these are sentiments that are shared between other dealers out there in the market, not just myself. So what do we really have here at the end of the day besides the numbers and some trends? I can share with you that there are industry veterans that have been trading watches, some of them 40 years. You have a lot of people that have been with Rolex since they were just selling for pennies compared to where they are today, and they're genuinely confused. And there are some really sharp and frugal business minds in the watch industry that just love watches and love to trade in them, and they're getting confused as well. They're describing this as a frenzy. I love to talk with those that have been through the ringer, so to speak, because things go in cycles sometimes, and it's always really fascinating. And I can share with you that what's going on with the Rolex pricing and kind of the frenzy is really confusing a lot of people that have been doing this for a long time. So my kind of takeaway from this that I want to share with you is not to say, hey, Rolex prices are going to drop, because I really don't know, right? I made a video a year and a half ago, roughly pre-COVID, where I said, I noticed there's a pullback in the pricing. Maybe it'll go down. The prices pulled back a little bit, but then they went up. And as new things happen, no one could have predicted COVID, really. As new things happen, certainly the trajectory can change. So I'm not saying, hey, get out of all your Rolex. Not what I'm saying, but I'm maybe kind of providing a bit of a warning for those that really don't want the watch, but they're like, hey, maybe I can make a few bucks on this. If that's you, I might consider not doing that, just because we're getting into this uncharted territory. It's confusing a lot of industry veterans. You have a lot of forces that are propping up these prices. And when you look at just how many of these watches are on the market, someday these dealers are going to need to sell the watches, right? Someday they're going to need to move their money. They're going to need to turn a profit. If sales slow down, they have it in the watch industry during COVID, surprisingly, but if sales slow down, they're going to need to be able to pay their bills, and in which case these Rolexes are going to go out on the market. They're already there. The prices are going to have to go down, in which case I think there could be a serious pullback and a little bit of a tumble in the pricing. So if you're kind of on the fence, like, hey, do I get a Daytona? It's now or never, but you don't love the watch, you don't want to spend 30, I would say, hey, probably not worth it. I could be wrong, but if you're on the fence and you're risk averse, I'm sharing this with you if you are that guy or girl. But what do you guys think? Is there anything about the Rolex pricing or the Rolex market that just kind of blows your mind? Do you see any similarities? Do you think it's a bubble? Do you not think it's a bubble? Do you think I'm absolutely crazy and that Rolex prices are going to go to the moon and your entire collection is comprised of ceramic bezel stainless steel Rolex sports models. Regardless, I want to hear it and see it in the comments below. Guys, thanks again. We'll see you next time. You have been chatting with John Pete. Ciao.